92-year-old veteran confronted by street racers. When he makes a phone call, they turn pale. Henry was slowly walking down the sidewalk of the small town, the afternoon sun warming his aged face. At 92, his body no longer responded as it once did, but his mind remained sharp, filled with memories that accompanied him like benevolent ghosts. Took a deep breath, savoring the aroma of fresh bread wafting from the bakery, and recalled his youth when afternoons were long and filled with possibilities. It was hard not to think about his time in the war, when life was a constant battle, but he always tried to focus on the small joys that life provided him. For him, each step was a victory. "Oh, how I cherish the simplicity of life," he murmured to himself as he spotted the local market in the distance. His heart swelled with gratitude as he thought of the friendships he had cultivated over the years and the contributions he had made to the community. He remembered Kelly, his longtime girlfriend, and how the days spent with her were filled with laughter and dreams. The memory of her smile still warmed his chest, even after so many years. As he reached the market parking lot, Henry noticed a group of young people surrounded by sports cars. They were laughing loudly, performing dangerous maneuvers with their vehicles. The veteran hesitated for a moment, feeling somewhat out of place. He knew that young people often lacked respect for their elders, but he was determined not to let that bother him. He adjusted his tie, a habit he maintained even for his simplest outings. "Dignity is all we have left," thought, moving toward the group. However, as he approached, the atmosphere shifted drastically. The young people noticed his presence, and in an instant, the laughter turned into taunts. "Look who we have here, Grandpa," shouted Jason, leader of the group. Disdain. Henry tried to ignore them, focusing on his mission to buy some fresh fruits and vegetables, but the young people's attitude deeply unsettled him. "Hey, do you still remember how to drive a car? Or do you only know how to use a walker?" mocked another young man, while the others laughed, their contempt evident. Henry felt his heart race. He knew he shouldn't let himself be shaken, but the intimidation was palpable, like a shadow following him. "Leave me alone," Henry said, his voice firm but trembling. He didn't want to get into a fight, but he also wasn't going to let himself be humiliated. "I've been through much worse than this." "Worse things? Oh, tell me more, Grandpa. You must have a lot of war stories to tell us," Jason exclaimed, laughing as he moved closer, encircling Henry like a predator stalking its prey. Frustration began to turn into anger within Henry. But he fought against it. Memories of his youth, his friends in the war, Kelly surfaced in his mind, and he felt more determined not to let those young people disrespect him. "You have no idea what it is to face true fear," Henry said, keeping his head held high. "What you're doing isn't bravery. It's just cowardice." His words, though sincere, didn't seem to have any effect. The young people continued to laugh, and the feeling of helplessness began to settle within him. He looked around for help, but there was no one nearby. Tension in the air was palpable, and Henry knew the situation could escalate quickly. Took a deep breath, trying to find a way out of this situation without further confrontation. Life is too precious to be lost in the taunts of children, thought. He prepared to move on, determined not to let this moment ruin his day. But at the same time, a seed of worry began to sprout in his mind. What else could those young people do? Henry felt his heart race as the group of runners surrounded his aging body. Their leader, Jason, approached with a cynical smile that promised nothing good. "Look what we have here, folks. The town grandpa. What do you have in your bag, Grandpa? A little oatmeal to feed the kids." Taunt echoed among the others, who laughed uncontrollably. "Leave me alone," Henry replied, trying to keep his voice steady. The insecurity showed in his tone. He was 92 years old, having faced battles far tougher than this, but the cruelty of youth was a different adversary. With a sudden movement, one of the runners, a skinny kid with messy hair, stepped closer and began to rummage through Henry's pocket. "Let's see what Grandpa has. What are you carrying? High blood pressure medication?" Henry felt the heat of humiliation rising up his neck. The young man pulled an object from Henry's pocket, his old watch, a gift from Kelly, his childhood sweetheart. The gleam of the metal reflected the sunlight, almost as if it were blinking, trying to catch the attention of someone who cared. "Look at this," Grandpa watch. I bet this is worth a fortune at the antique shop. Or maybe it's just a relic of a lost love, isn't it? Jason jeered, holding the watch like a trophy. Give that back, you immature kid. Henry shouted, feeling the anger swell inside him. What was supposed to be a symbol of love and memories was now an object of mockery. The young people laughed even more, ignoring the request, while Jason continued to make sarcastic comments. Who would have thought an old man like you still keeps things from his youth? I bet you don't even remember her anymore. The situation worsened. Henry, now fixated on his watch, remembered Kelly, how she looked at him with love and hope. The world around him seemed to fade away as he remembered their hugs and laughter, but all of it was being destroyed by those disrespectful young people. He took a deep breath, trying to ignore the taunts, but the laughter echoed in his ears like a lament. Come on, Grandpa, you're not going to do anything. What are you going to do? Cry? I'll help you. Jason teased, giving Henry a light shove as if trying to provoke a reaction. Henry felt powerless and isolated. His dignity, which he held in high regard, was being dismantled before his eyes. Intending to walk away, he started heading toward the market. But the bullies weren't ready to let their prey escape so easily. Hey, Grandpa, where are you going? We're not done with the party yet, shouted one of Jason's friends, running after Henry while the others laughed and followed. Upon reaching the market, Henry tried to focus on his shopping list, ignoring the curious looks of the customers who were beginning to gather. But the bullies didn't relent. Look at that old man. What's he gonna buy? Some flour for his porridge? Jason continued to torment him as he got even closer. Why don't you just go away and leave me alone? Henry pleaded, his voice trembling with frustration. He felt his sanity slipping away along with his dignity. But the bullies just smiled, as if the pain they caused was a form of entertainment. The atmosphere was heavy, the tension rising, and Henry's helplessness was palpable. At that moment, a familiar figure emerged from the crowd. It was Margaret, childhood friend of Henry's who had always supported him. She approached with a determined expression. Hey, what are you doing to him? This isn't right. But her voice was drowned out by the laughter of the young people, who ignored her as if she were just another spectator in the spectacle they had created. Who are you, his grandma? Jason said mockingly, while Henry looked at Margaret with hope, seeing her determination to intervene. Don't get involved, dear. This isn't your business, he muttered, feeling even more ashamed for needing help. Don't worry, Henry. I won't let this happen, she replied, but the confidence in her voice seemed distant, almost like an echo in a desert of disdain. The bullies, secure in their invincibility, continued to laugh, and the situation only seemed to worsen. Henry's desire for someone to stand up for him felt more and more like a distant dream. Henry walked through the market, his heart still racing from the earlier confrontation. As he entered, fresh air and the familiar smell of fruits and vegetables weren't enough to calm his mind. The group of bullies was there, surrounding him like predators after their prey. Jason, the leader, approached with a sarcastic smile, challenging. Look who showed up! The brave grandpa! Exclaimed Jason, making exaggerated gestures with his hand. The other young people laughed, their mockery echoing throughout the area, and Henry felt the weight of the other customers' stares fixed on him, as if he were on a stage, exposed and vulnerable. I just want to do my shopping, Henry replied, trying to keep his voice steady, but he could feel the tension in the air. The bullies moved even closer, blocking the exit. Oh, but you're not going anywhere soon, are you? Said one of Jason's friends, a guy with messy hair and visible tattoos. Let's have a little more fun. Why don't you try being nicer? A female voice intervened. It was Margaret, his childhood friend, who had entered the store right behind him. Her gaze was firm, but Henry could see the concern on her face. And who are you, ma'am? Jason said dismissively. Can't you see we're just having fun? Margaret didn't let herself be intimidated. This isn't fun. Bullying. She replied resolutely. You need to learn to respect your elders. Respect? Jason laughed as if the idea were absurdly ridiculous. And what do you know about respect, old lady? The atmosphere became heavy and oppressive, and Henry felt small. He looked at the watch still on his wrist, a gift from Kelly, and the memory of her brought him a nostalgic warmth. Those memories took him back to a time when life was simpler and full of promise. But the reality around him was cruel and relentless. "Look, I just want to leave," Henry said, trying to ignore the pain forming in his chest. "You don't have to do this." "And what are you going to do? Cry?" Jason taunted, while his friends laughed. "Come on, Grandpa, show us what you've got." At that moment, Margaret, noticing the watch on Henry's wrist, exclaimed, "Wait a minute, that's the watch Kelly gave you, isn't it?" All eyes turned to Henry, and a current of silence hung in the air. The mention of Kelly made Henry's heart race. He hadn't thought of her in so long, and the memory of him hugging her, laughing, and dreaming about the future now mixed with the dark present. "Kelly," he murmured, lost in his memories. "Who's Kelly?" Jason asked, confused. "Some ex-girlfriend?" "None of your business," Margaret replied firmly, but Henry interrupted her. "No, it's okay, Margaret," he said, taking a deep breath. "Ellie was a very special woman to me. She gave me this watch when we were young." The bullies seemed to hesitate for a moment. Henry's vulnerability touched something in them, but soon Jason's smile returned. "Oh, how romantic," he mocked. "Come on, Grandpa, that's just an old story." Henry, feeling powerless, decided he could no longer endure that treatment. Desire to stand up for himself burned within him. He looked at his phone in his pocket and, with renewed determination, decided it was time to act. "Enough," he exclaimed, pulling out his phone. "I'm going to call someone who will put an end to this nonsense." The young people stared at him, surprised by his attitude. Henry, even while trembling, felt a thread of courage run through his body. He knew he had to do something. Looking at Margaret, who encouraged him with a supportive glance, he dialed the number he knew by heart, determined to change the course of the situation. Henry, with his heart racing, held his phone with shaky hands as he stared at the young people surrounding him. Jason's mockery, and that of his friends, echoed in his mind, like a distant echo from times he would rather forget. He knew he needed to do something, and that moment of intimidation was the trigger that pushed him to act. Taking a deep breath, he dialed the mayor's number, a friend he had met during the war days, and waited as the phone rang. "Hello?" Familiar voice of the mayor came through on the other end of the line. "Sam, it's me, Henry. I need help," he said, trying to remain calm despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. The young people, noticing he was busy, intensified their taunts. "Look at that, Grandpa. Who are you going to call now? Spider-Man?" Jason laughed while his friends joined in the mockery. "I think he's calling Daddy." Henry ignored the jibes and continued talking to the mayor. "I'm being surrounded by a group of young people in front of the market. They're intimidating me, and I don't know how this is going to end." "Stay calm, Henry. I'll send the police. You're safe, right?" Sam replied, his voice laced with concern. "I'm fine, but this needs to stop. They have no respect for anyone," Henry said, feeling anger and frustration swell within him. He didn't want to be seen as a victim, but Jason's words cut deeper than he would like to admit. "I'm on my way. Don't worry," Sam promised before hanging up. With a mix of relief and apprehension, Henry looked around. The young ones, realizing he was on the phone, seemed restless. Jason, in particular, was fidgeting. "Hey, Grandpa, who are you calling? Your mommy?" teased, laughing along with his friends, but the laughter began to fade when Henry, with a steady gaze, replied, "Don't worry, kid. You'll soon understand what it means to respect your elders." The young people, though still secure in their arrogance, exchanged nervous glances. The atmosphere shifted, and tension began to hang in the air. Henry, feeling that his call might have been the key to changing the dynamic, lifted his chin and locked eyes with Jason. "You may think you're strong now, but true strength is proven in times of adversity." And it was at that moment, the police siren pierced the air, like a cry of hope. The runners looked toward the sound, surprised and scared. "Damn, what are we going to do?" one of Jason's friends whispered, confident expression quickly turning into panic. "Stay calm. They can't do anything." Jason tried to maintain his composure, but his voice trembled. A police car stopped in front of the market, and two officers got out with determined expressions. "What's going on here?" one of them asked, quickly assessing the situation. Henry, feeling the weight of the police presence, took a deep breath and began to explain. "These kids are intimidating me, making jokes and searching me. This isn't right," he said, his voice firm and clear. The officers exchanged glances and, without hesitation, approached the runners. "You all, come with me," one of the officers ordered as he moved closer to Jason and his friends. "We need to talk about what's happening." Tone was authoritative, and the confidence the young men had started to slip away like sand through their fingers. "Oh no, this can't be happening," Jason murmured as he tried to step back. But there was no way to escape now. Police had already surrounded the area and were ready to act. "You can't do this." "We didn't do anything wrong," one of Jason's friends shouted, his voice filled with desperation. But the reality of the situation began to sink in among them. Henry watched, with a mix of satisfaction and sadness, as the young men were taken into custody. He wanted them to learn a lesson, but he also felt a pang of compassion. After all, he had been young and impulsive once too. When the officers began to ask questions, Henry felt relieved, but the adrenaline was still coursing through him. He hadn't expected a simple trip to the market to turn into such a pivotal moment, but at the same time, felt it was necessary. He couldn't allow the intimidation to continue unchecked. And more importantly, couldn't let the memory of Kelly and his youth be tarnished by such cruel actions. As the young men were led away, Henry turned to the group of onlookers that had gathered around, some admiring his courage and others with expressions of shock. He felt a little stronger, but he knew that the battle against intimidation and disrespect didn't end there. He had taken an important step, but what would come next was still uncertain. The arrest of the young runners quickly spread throughout the town. Within hours, news of Henry's bravery began to echo on the radio waves and in the pages of local newspapers. The small community, which had always admired the veteran, now celebrated him as a hero. In his modest home, Henry, still in shock from the events the previous day, received an unexpected visit. It was Margaret, childhood friend, who brought a bouquet of flowers. "Are you okay, Henry?" she asked, looking into his eyes with concern. "I am, yes, Margaret." "Just a little." Surprised by all this, Henry replied, trying to smile, but his hands trembled slightly. "I never thought I'd make the news one day." Margaret chuckled softly. "You've always been a model of courage, dear. Those kids didn't know who they were messing with." Henry sighed, recalling the humiliation he had endured. "Yeah, but I don't know if it's courage or just the need to defend myself. I was a soldier, but this was different. It was personal." As they spoke, Henry's phone rang. It was a call from the local news channel requesting an interview. He hesitated, but Margaret encouraged him. "You should speak, Henry. This is an important moment. People need to hear your story." Reluctantly, Henry agreed, and within minutes a reporter arrived at his home, equipped with cameras and a microphone. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation. "Mr. Henry, how do you feel after what happened?" the reporter asked as he adjusted the microphone. "I feel relieved," Henry said, his voice steady despite his age, "but also sad. Sad to see young people behaving like this. That's not how we should treat each other." The reporter nodded, urging him to continue. "Could you share a bit about your experience in the war?" Henry took a deep breath, recalling his youth. "War taught me that life is precious and that each of us has a role to play. I learned to fight for those who can't fight for themselves, and that includes fighting against injustice, whatever it may be." The interview lasted about half an hour, but when it ended, Henry felt a little lighter. He knew his story could inspire others to act with compassion and respect. Meanwhile, across town, Jason, the ringleader, was at home listening to the news about the arrest and the fallout surrounding Henry's name. His father had come home from work and was visibly emotional. "Did you know, Jason? That man helped me when I was in trouble," his father said, eyes glistening. Jason looked at his father, surprised. "What do you mean?" "I remember a day when I was being bullied at school. Henry showed up and stood up for me. He didn't have to do that, but he did. I've always admired that man," his father said, his voice trembling with emotion. "He truly cares about people." Jason felt a weight on his chest. "I didn't know that. I just wanted to be cool with my friends. I didn't think it would hurt anyone." "Sometimes, what we consider a joke can be very painful for others, my son. It's time for you to reflect on your actions and the impact they have on people's lives," his father advised, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. Jason spent the night awake. thinking about what his father had said. He couldn't get Henry out of his mind. That man who faced life with such bravery, even in his advanced age. "I need to apologize," he murmured to himself as he looked out the window, lost in his thoughts. The next morning, Henry received more visitors, this time from members of the community who wanted to express their support. He felt embraced, comforting sensation enveloping him like a warm hug. People brought sweets, flowers, and words of encouragement. But deep in his heart, he knew that true change began with empathy and reflection. And perhaps Jason, upon hearing his father's story, would find a path to redemption. As the sun shone in the sky, Henry looked out the window, feeling hopeful. Life had its twists and turns, and he was ready to face whatever came his way. For courage was not limited to struggle, but also to forgiveness and reconciliation. Kelly, the local police chief, was in her office reviewing a report on the arrest of the young runners. However, her mind was far away. Listening to stories about veteran Henry, nostalgia enveloped her. Her gaze fell on the clock on her desk, a gift from her father many years ago. He always said that each mark on the face told a story. And now, hearing Henry's name, curiosity intensified. As she delved into her memories, an image of her mother emerged in her mind. She often spoke of a lost love in her youth, a certain Henry who had an old watch that, according to her, symbolized a time and a love that should never have been forgotten. Kelly decided to investigate more about that veteran who was now the center of attention. That same afternoon, she headed to the place where Henry was confronted by the runners. The scene was still fresh in the minds of the townspeople. As she approached the market, she saw Henry emerging, with an expression that mixed relief and concern. Hearing the murmurs of the crowd, curiosity grew. Kelly walked up to him, her heart racing. "Mr. Henry?" she asked, her voice soft yet firm. Henry turned, surprised to see a woman in uniform. "Yes, that's me. How can I help you, young lady?" "I'm Kelly, the police chief. I was hearing about what happened to you. I believe we have a connection." Henry's expression lit up with a mix of recognition and confusion. "You are the daughter of..." "Yes, I'm Kelly, your former girlfriend's daughter. My mother always talked about you and the love you had. She kept that watch you gave her as a treasure." Henry fell silent, memories flooding his mind. Kelly's smile, her gentle laughter, and the way her eyes sparkled when they spoke of their future together. "Ah, yes, I remember her. She was an incredible woman." The two sat on a nearby bench, and the conversation flowed. "What happened between you two?" Kelly asked, a touch of sadness in her voice. "We were young and dreamed of the future, but life took us down different paths. The war changed me in ways I could never have imagined. When I came back, I realized I had lost the courage to search for her. She never forgot you, you know?" Kelly said, her gaze fixed on his eyes. "This story has been part of our family for generations. I would love to see you and my mother reunite." Henry smiled. There was a sadness in his eyes. "What if she doesn't want to see me after all these years? What will I say?" "I believe she would want to know how you are, and besides, you deserve to be recognized not just as a veteran, but as someone who truly loved." Kelly had an idea. "How about we organize a ceremony in your honor? A way to show the community what you really represent and how important you are to all of us." Henry hesitated, but the determination in Kelly's eyes encouraged him. "It would be an honor, but I don't know if I'm ready for that." "You are not alone, Henry. You are a hero, and your story needs to be told. Not only for the bravery you showed today, but for the love you have always carried in your heart. Let's do this together." The two stood up, and a new sense of hope began to blossom between them. As they walked toward the town center, Kelly looked at Henry and said, "Let's do this for you and for my mother. And who knows, for a new beginning." Henry smiled, his insecurities dissipating a little. "If you're by my side, maybe I can find the courage I need." Meanwhile, the hallways, now processed and condemned, faced the consequences of their actions. Their fate served as a reminder that respect and empathy are fundamental, while the love story between Henry and his old girlfriend began to resonate once more, showing that it is never too late to start over, and that true love can overcome even the greatest obstacle. In life, we all face battles, some visible, others invisible. But it is in respect, courage, and love that we find the strength to prevail. Henry shows us that it is never too late to start over, to forgive, and above all, love. Respect people, value their stories, and remember, true love never fades. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell to receive all updates. Share this message and inspire others to find the courage within themselves.